attending today's webinar, Funding Security for K-12 Schools. We're delighted to have Jeff Jennings, the Senior SLED Practice Director at Fortinet, present funding sources for K-12 schools. Fortinet is a key partner vendor for CCSI, and we're delighted to have Jeff today. And this is an important topic and is sure to bring valuable information for your technology funding needs. So a little bit about CCSI. For those of you not familiar with us, we've been in business since 1974 with our core competencies consisting of infrastructure for data center, wireless, disaster recovery, video surveillance, and access control, customized hardware maintenance offerings, 24/7 application monitoring solutions. We're a managed service provider for NOC, Network Operations Center, and a managed security operations center, SOC, and offer our well-received Threat Protect cybersecurity managed services.
It's time? Yeah. Okay.
We'd like to recognize the CCSI staff who made this webinar possible today. Joe Riccio, our Director of K-12 Sales and Operations, Alan Tapadino, our Senior Network Consultant, Catherine Irizarry, who's our Marketing Specialist, who helped us with the slides, was invaluable in putting that together, Christina Maxdorf and Donna Luciano, who are our inside sales support team, and then myself, Rob Villano, who's the cybersecurity manager. For any questions today during our call, we'd like you to direct them to Catherine Irizarry using the WebEx chat box. These will be answered at the conclusion of the presentation. Following today's event, a survey will be sent for you to complete to help us identify your cybersecurity interests. We appreciate your feedback. Then we'd like to make you aware that in 2 weeks, CCSI is offering CCSI Cybersecurity Solutions and Services for K-12 education. Here we'll speak to you about how you can strengthen your cybersecurity defenses with using our well-received Threat Protect cybersecurity services. This is on Wednesday, May 11th at 11 a.m. We hope you're available and sign up. With that, we'd like to turn it over to Jeff Jennings, our vendor partner at Fortinet, to discuss today's webinar. Welcome, Jeff.
Thank you very much, and it is a very nice pleasure to be able to meet with you all, and thank you for taking the time to meet with me as well. And the CCSI team, they're a fantastic partner for Fortinet. So I'd like to jump in. There's a lot to cover. Please, if you have questions, put them in the chat and we'll address them at the end. And also, if you're a private school, let us know that, because there's separate funding that you may or may not qualify through State Department of Ed in New York, EANS funding. We'll talk a little bit more about that, but let's go ahead and jump in. Again, there's a lot to cover, a lot of changing things going on. So the challenges and the pain points of K-12, and those have been hyper pivoted over the last 2 years since the pandemic started. And that transformation to digital learning, which was estimated to take a 8 to 10 year period, was done in a matter of months. And the challenges you have faced and the fact that you're still in education, to me, absolute hats off to you. If you've ever read Teddy Roosevelt's The Man in the Arena, that absolutely applies to educators and the ed tech and the IT teams that support them, because without IT and technology, the practice and business of education would have fallen flat and died during the pandemic. 98% of the schools worldwide were closed at the height of the pandemic. So we're going to talk about the challenges, not so much then, but what you're coming into now. Cybersecurity, including the new law and the new federal cyber czar, the CISA office, and the cybersecurity insurance. All this is impacting you. If it hasn't hit you now, it will over the next 15 months in a big way. And then the budget and funding, but I'm going to do a spoiler alert. We're going to talk money early. But the challenges you're facing today, 30% of all K-12 students and 10% of teachers lack adequate internet access. That's still by and far what we've seen. We've now done Myself, I've done a little over 1,130, well, this is 1,136 calls where we've done webinars and presentations with education and government. We have our capture team as a whole has done over 1,400 since this started. And our capture team is the program support team that promotes education and works with CSI to promote you as well. 408 successful attacks against U.S. public schools in 2020. And I'll show you an even bigger stat on that in a moment. And then, of course, you had all the budget issues come down. So the pain points for the administration: increased demands for new technologies and tools to implement digital strategies. You absolutely felt that. You had an exponential increase in the number of devices, exponential increase in the amount of pressure on your network, and you had to secure and filter all those devices, whether they were on campus or off. The lack of budget and resources to be able to shift to that, and we're going to talk about that's a big reason why ESSER was brought in. There's a lot of confusion about the elementary secondary school emergency relief program and what is eligible and how that's run. We'll cover that. And the IT leaders, your workload exponentially increased. I'm using that a lot, but it happened. But you didn't get to add people. You got to add mountains of more work and mountains of more stress, but you did not, for the large part, get to add people. And then you had to add security and compliance along with all of that. By the way, there's more compliance coming. We'll address that as well. But here's in more than 1,331 successful attacks. That's from 2019 through 2021. I need to fix that. And it's massive. And there's not been a single state, and there's only been one territory, U.S. territory, and that's American Samoa, who hasn't had that happen. Everybody else has. Nope. And this is your greater area. Clearly, your region has been impacted by cybersecurity attacks, and this is only K12. And these are only the published attacks that we know about. We know, and the cybersecurity czars that we're going to talk about in a minute believe that it's 40% underreported. There's a change to that that's coming very quickly that we're going to talk about, but many of you may know people have had this issue, and if you've gone through it, it's horrible. I had a superintendent friend, they didn't use Fortinet out here in California, 37 sites taken down the month before the pandemic hit. So much so that everything with an IP address, that was laptops, Chromebooks, all their network devices, their environmental controls, their GPS, a lot of their bus systems, their food management systems, the cafeteria, all of it was taken down and lock solid. They had to remove every device because the ransom was just too high. $11 million later, 6 months later, they were able to finally recover. But as the superintendent, who, by the way, retired early, told me, he goes, Jeff, it's like it's 1975 and nobody did digital learning and dealt with a pandemic in 1975. And so unfortunately, that led to him being retiring early, which is too bad. He was a very good superintendent. And honestly, it wasn't the competitor who had the account's fault. It was because the IT director didn't allow his team to do security updates. He would only do it, and he was 6 revolutions or 6 patches behind. That's not good. So I've seen it live out in real time. So the cybersecurity landscape you're facing, 75% of all breaches involve third parties. You still have your inside attacks and things like that. Miami-Dade got taken down by a DDoS attack on the first day of school last year. That was a 16-year-old junior who was bored and didn't want to go back to school, and he said he was bored, so he did a 4-day DDoS attack that took down the entire network. Social engineering, miscellaneous errors, 86% of breaches, 99 reported data breaches, and thousands is an understatement. It's actually hit millions. Maryland, the city of Baltimore school district got taken down hard for 4 days. And again, it was a big problem. And attacks are ongoing. 90% of K-12 begin with a phishing campaign. That's an evil email is what it is. It looks normal. And every one of the massive attacks that we've gone in and reviewed later, by the way, we've not had that issue. The only time we've had that issue is when the IT director left and nobody knew they needed to update their firewall. And that was the only time. By the way, we were able to recover it because they had great recovery practices and they got all their staff certified and now are doing great. And again, it was because they didn't update, just like what happened with the competitor. So, but the big problem is the human error side. And that's where cyber hygiene comes in. Being able to check by mousing over the email address to make sure it's legitimate is one of the biggest issues, because innocently clicking on an email that looks legit opens the door to Pandora's box. And one thing you can do is we have our Fortinet NSC Training Academy that used to be expensive, but during the pandemic, our CEO, Ken Z, made that free. It's full certifications, level 1 and 2. Again, this is free to you, is the perfect 2 levels to get your staff and your students up to date on proper cyber hygiene. It's all video and self-paced. We'd be glad to share that with you, and CCSI can get that information to you. So what we say is evil is everywhere, and you have to be able to develop trust, but with that, you got to have the security in place before you can trust. Now, the spoiler alert on the funding, the ESSER program is all through Title I Part A. If you don't get Title I Part A funding, then you're one of the 5% of the schools on the public side that didn't get the money. For private schools, if you qualified for EANS funding, which is the private school side, which you can check with the State Department of Ed to see that, and it primarily focuses on those that serve the underserved first. That's one way to do it. They don't have a public list of that at the site. This site is from the U.S. Department of Ed, and you can see out of $14 billion for the state of New York, 11.7 has been spent through February 28th. That is woefully behind. Now, none of the states are over 40% spent at all, but 11.7 is a problem. And why is it a problem? It's because if you look where it says 78% spent in the lower left corner of and that's the first round that was 2 years ago. Now, the problem is, and we're going to talk about how you can go get this information and become an advocate for the funding, because frankly, you're not going to be able to sit back and wait for it, but it's not as big a climb as you think. So this money has to be spent by this coming September 30th. The balance for the state of New York, and each of you if you're public schools, most of you will have Title or Round 1 funding. We'll talk about that in a minute. But it's got to be spent by this coming September 30th. If it is not, the feds will take it back. And we know this because when the higher education program, HERF, didn't hit their spending on their balance, they had different dates. The feds took back $6 billion that wasn't spent. And back in the 1800s, I was an adaptive PE teacher, special ed teacher, became an administrator. I always made sure and spent federal money first, then state, then local. Always spent it down to zero. It would be a big mistake to give Uncle Sam back any of this money that's been allocated to you. And it's been allocated to you, not the state of New York. Every act, all 3 acts, the CARES Act, CRRSA, and ARP, which are the 3 acts, all call out that 90% of the allotted allocation must go to the local education agency. For public schools, that's you. It's not your BOCES, it's you. And so it's required to go to you. And we've had Texas and Wisconsin, which tried to hold it at the state level. They got sued by their schools, and they finally got the message. So you do have to work with local procurement. You have to meet any state guidelines, which are at the New York Department of Ed. But this money is to be spent and to be used. Also, this money has 15 areas of latitude, which we'll go over in a minute. But all of it, all 3 acts include using the money for technology. And if anybody's told you any different, they're incorrect. If anybody told you this is a reimbursement program, that's absolutely 100% incorrect, because all three acts call that the money goes straight to the district. The district is to use it as the district sees fit. So if you were told that this is a reimbursement program, it is in the sense that in the middle of the pandemic, before the first round came, you can reimburse for expenses. But it is not a reimbursement program. There's no matching dollars assigned to it like there is with E-rate. It's 100% federal money, 100% federal spend, zero impact on your local budget. So that's why if you have not gotten any funding, and we know that well over 60% of technology in the first two rounds for schools, well over 60% did not get it. 64% to be precise. So we need to make sure that you're going to go after that. We're going to show you how to do that. Round two has to be spent by a year from in September 30, 2023. And round three has to be spent by 2024. And you can see the progress New York has made. So to get more specific, I just pulled some things from different sources just to give you an example. So Riverhead on this slide, they had in the first round $144,008. I'm sure you spent that. Second round, CRRSA. Oh, this is for the governor's fund, by the way. Let me up here. This is the governor's fund. So that came from the state. I'm sure you spent that. What Riverhead got for CARES Act from the feds, $849,689. In the second round, $5,529,444. And in the third round, which was the biggest round by far, $12,766,398. I tend to perseverate when I see millions of dollars. Miller Place, same thing. So in the governor's fund, first two rounds, you can see that about 290,000, but in the federal money, which went straight to you through the state, CARES Act 179,000, CRRSA 1.9 million, ARP 1.2 million. Now, in a very few instances did the money go down from round two. For whatever reason, and it would have to deal with your Title I allocations, that number was lower for ARP. But again, this money is sitting there and there's not a lot of handcuffs on it, and the district can see how they see it, do as they see fit. So we can see the same thing for Southampton Union Free School District, 141 for the ESSER. I didn't include the governor's fund, 496, and then 1.115. So this is real money. This money has been sent down. So here's another way to look at it. So for the ARP, which is the third round, these numbers are real. This came from the State Department of Ed, for New York State Department of Ed. So please take note of that funding. And if you have questions about this, start putting them in the chat. So so I wanted to get the money out there to get your attention. If we didn't have your name up there, we can absolutely look at it, and we can set up direct times with you through CCSI, and we can, with CCI, we'll walk through this funding and the funding that's coming and give you a school-specific plan. Private schools, we can do the same thing. We can help deal with that. We have a whole support team and grant support team, because a lot of that is going to be required for the upcoming funds coming in from the White House and the feds. So the challenges and compliance you're facing is going to just actually increase coming up. So you need to know that. So we need to get the funding you need to be able to support this. You have this digital transformation. Now you're being forced by mandate and law to do a security transformation. And so you can see the challenges there, and you're going to get these slides, so don't worry about that. And all of this is being filtered through the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. You may have heard the term Shields Up. That's from the CISA. They are the new cybersecurity czar. And they are required, and they're basically the overlord for everything in the nation for cybersecurity, both public and private. The White House gave a mandate that all federal agencies will have zero trust network architecture by 2024. We'll talk about that more in a minute. That absolutely is going to flow down to state and local government, and absolutely flow into K12 as well, and we're going to see how that starts in just a minute. But if you've never been to the CISA, it's CISA.gov. Look up specifically for K12. It's very easy to do. They're going to be releasing very soon, their recommendations for K12 cybersecurity. Those recommendations are going to convert to mandates within the next 15 months. Absolutely will happen. We've all seen it happen. Now the goal is to have it be a funded mandate and not an unfunded mandate like filtering was required with the E-rate program. It was required, but they didn't fund it, which has been a real source of pain in my side ever since. I think that's completely wrong. The FCC screwed that up. But I would bookmark this because there's going to be a lot of information coming through here. And then the breaking news, so the Senate passed cybersecurity legislation that's going to force cyber attack reporting. So if you get ransomware and cyber attack, because they really do feel it is way underreported, you're going to be a mandated reporter for cyber incidents, whether they were successful or not. So that you got to do it within 72 hours. So that's going to put some pressure on your team. And we're going to talk about more of that. But what was enacted in October, the K12 Cybersecurity Law, and again, if you've got questions on this, put these in the chat. But the Cybersecurity Law is in place. And I mentioned the CISA, so they've been doing their recommendations. We've been meeting with them as a lot of the other manufacturers and security providers. And that's because this is absolutely going to be a public-private partnership. And so that's why we have implemented massive outreach and providing all kinds of resources and reduce costs for cyber equipment and things like that. But following their recommendation coming out, they're going to release a toolkit. And that toolkit is going to give you what the CISA believes are the minimum necessary tools to be able to put together a cybersecurity plan and program. So what you should be doing now, and this came down through legal news, and everything that I'm showing you, we always provide the resources. You'll see those URLs because we want you to understand where this comes from. It's not just us trying to sell a widget. This is absolutely honest and truthful. What we want to be is honest, open, and transparent with you and get the information out to you. So what they're recommending is, one, cyber-informed culture. That's why you need to have cyber-specific training. The NSC, which won't cost you a dime, especially those first two levels, your staff will be able to do. Level 3, level 4, level 5, more on the technical side, but we will train your teams up on your network side, security side, free as well. They can definitely grab, and by the way, there's certifications for each of these that are industry accepted. So in fact, when we started this at the start of the pandemic, we were hoping to hit 1 million. We're going to 1 million users. We're a little over 600-something thousand that have taken this on since the pandemic started. It's self-paced and works great. But one thing they're going to require, and you should get ahead of it now, is having EDR, endpoint protection. We have Fortinet EDR. There's several EDRs out there. I will say we believe ours is the best, but they're going to push you to put a security fabric solution. Another way of saying that is zero trust network architecture. Just having a firewall at the front gate, the front entrance with your internet, is no longer the standard at all. In fact, it's not effective. Not near as effective as it needs to be. And if it's not next gen, then you're really sitting there with wide open attack points. But what they're now pushing for you to do is have complete zero trust, meaning nobody gets trusted. You have security and you have verification everywhere. So that's going to be required. So getting in front of that with at least putting EDR, again, endpoint protection on your devices, is not only recommended, it's going to be required. And another reason it's going to be required, cyber insurance has skyrocketed. And we were with a school district in South Carolina about 3 months ago. Their premium went up 341%. We're seeing 100% premium increases all over. And they're also now taking, you used to have to take a survey, and it was very easy. Now we've seen where they're coming on site to government school insurance carriers are sending inspectors, auditors, and they're assessing your awareness and your cybersecurity plan. And so if you don't do that, and that's what happened with this South Carolina school, they said it's going to be 300. If you implement everything that we're giving you as a requirement, we will be able to drop that down to 150% increase. But you've got 60 days, or they pay the higher premium. And some schools, if they don't get this in line, they're being rejected and will not get the insurance. And we've already seen that happen. So insurance companies, by the way, this wasn't done in a vacuum. It was done alongside with the White House and the Cybersecurity Office. And the Cybersecurity Office has a big budget, and they're going to have a big hammer. And so they're going to be effective. But they did this hand in hand. And you'll notice the same thing: multi-factor authentication, MFA, encryption, both passive and active, policies and procedures backup, which you'd be surprised how ineffective the backup was. And when they didn't have effective security controls, when ransomware came, it affected their backup. Endpoint detection and response, you see it there again. Cybersecurity insurance is requiring it moving forward. So if you don't have it, you need to get it. Again, massive increase in ransomware. So the two biggest issues you're facing are always budget and cost. So if we showed you a little bit about the budget, because that's always the number one, and then the second is need. So we'll deal more specifically with that. Also, if you didn't participate in the Emergency Connect Fund, which allowed the government opened up a window where they would pay up to $400 for a laptop or Chromebook, and up to $250 for a hotspot. We have controlling interest in Linksys, and we launched at this last summer the Linksys hotspot and data plans. Linksys, it's called Linksys Homework, HOMEWRK. It's secured by Fortinet. We're the most. Nobody has anywhere close to the security. Commercial is over. But if you didn't apply, this is for public and private. Again, data plans, hotspots. It's all considered to be off campus. E-rate is on campus. ECF is off campus. Hotspots, data plans, laptops, Chromebooks. You can apply for those. The third and final window, which they did an emergency third window, opens tomorrow. So please be aware of that. And it's in the same portal as your E-rate portal, Epic. The E-rate portal that everybody loves to hate, but that's where you're going to apply for it. If you have an E-rate consultant, they should be able to do this for you, no problem. It's going to be a very short window. They also moved out this, if you did the first two rounds of ECF, they moved it out to June 30th, 2023, because they've been so slow getting the funding out. Why? Because E-rate and ECF are both operating at the same time, and USAC, the Universal Service Administration Corporation, is running it with the same people. So they're understaffed, and yet they've got these both massive national programs running through the same funnel of people. So it can be a little frustrating, but again, this, unlike E-rate, is 100% federal, no matching numbers, no matching dollars. So please take advantage of this, and we can get more specifically into that. Again, it's not a possible third window. The window opens tomorrow. But again, who's eligible? Public and private schools and libraries, public libraries. Private schools, if you have over a $50 million endowment, you're out of luck, but that's less than 4% of the private schools in the U.S. So you can see what's covered: broadband connections, data plans, things like that, and the devices. So nothing on your internal network is covered with this. So, but what you did get, especially on the public school, you've had 3 rounds of ESSER funding. ESSER, that we talked about at the top of the discussion, is elementary, secondary school emergency relief. You can see the amount of monies that completely blew up. So in the first round, 13.2 for K12. Then the second round was 54 billion for K12, and in the third round, 128.6 billion with a B dollars. And like I said, you've got to spend this money This is when the monies came out at the bottom, the March and the December and the March. You got to spend these monies within these time frames. And you can just say, well, I'm going to start working on bucket 2. Make sure you zero out bucket 1. And for IT, check with your CBOs and your business office and find out what rattling change is left in that first round. Because if there's anything left, grab it. Because you're the only department that every other department must use to exist. Teachers can live without the cafeteria. MOT can live without teachers, et cetera, et cetera. Administration can live with, well, not for very long without cafeteria. But anyway, they all require you because the business and practice of education is encased in an IP packet since this digital transformation. You are the core, you are the heartbeat, the muscle, or the brain and the central nervous system. The practice and business of education can't exist without you right now and won't be able to going forward. You've got to realize how important that is. And I get really passionate about this because without you going and getting the money, and because you're used to waiting for your budget, E-rate, and maybe a bond. And with private schools, you're used to trying to figure out how to get some fundraising money in your hands along with your regular budget. Again, private schools, EANS is the federal down to the state level of this. Whether you qualify or not, we need to find out through the state. But if you don't go after this money, you will not get the money because unfortunately, because technology runs so smoothly for the most part, it's considered like electricity and water. It just works. They have no idea the amount of frantic work that's going on behind the curtain. And in fact, I wonder how quickly they would realize how important your function, your team, and your network is if it were to turn off for a day. The panic would cry out within 10 minutes. So you need to understand how important your network is as far as funding goes. And this is where you have to become an advocate, and you're not used to doing that. And I know it can be uncomfortable, but CCSI, along with our support team, will be able to help you with this march forward. And as long as there's Fortinet in whatever your plans are, we provide a ton of resources for you. And CCSI invests in you all the time already, and they're ready to move forward with you as well. But please remember, this money has to be spent. You either use it or you lose it. Why is that important? 61% did not spend on tech in the first 2 rounds. That's unforgivable, quite frankly. Now, there's 15 areas of latitude. Transportation, initially there were meals, but then the free lunch program stepped up, so you didn't need that so much. But bonuses for staff. There's all kinds of things that can be spent on, but in K12, in that 3rd round, virtually very little of it has been spent. Working with a district in Illinois, they have $108 million in the 3rd round. Their IT director says she's been told they won't get any of it because they need roofing, blah, 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 blah. I said, great, turn off the network and see what they say. Well, she wasn't going to do that. She just said this is not going to be useful. We went through the plan. By the way, once they did what we're going to talk about at the end of this, it worked out great, and she got a little bit more than she was asking for. Before, she had been denied, but she didn't put together a plan, because you need to understand what the educator handshake is. I used to be one. I can do this. Give me. But you need to give me with a plan. And that's what we're going to get to real quickly. So can ESSER be spent on technology in from the Office of the Department of Education? There's the URL there. Absolutely. Technology is called out 41 times in their guidance, with a wide use that includes security network, remote learning, etc., devices, anything that you need to practice education and the business of education to move that IP packet from point A to point wherever and back, and to secure it, and the circuits and the network and security devices and plan to do it, you can do it. You can use the money for it. Again, no match, 100% spend, no reimbursable. You can simply get with the administration to go ask that money be spent. That money will then be tracked. They have codes just like they do with Title I Part A that the business office can use to denote that. Cybersecurity is called out specifically in Section 821 of this document. And that's important because you're going to have new cybersecurity requirements that we talked about that if you don't use this funding for it, you're going to be in a world of hurt because you're going to be chasing after it instead of being prepared and getting out in front of it. And you cannot leave yourself vulnerable. There was a 21% increase in attacks from 2020 to 2021. We already know that it's going to exceed that in 2022. Absolutely, education is a top 5 target. Hotspots are called out 4 times. And again, there's the reference to the document. So for you to justify as well to your administration, the 4 key priorities in ESSER 2 and then the 5 in ESSER 3, notice accelerated learning. Technology is required to do that. Sustainable innovation, technology is required. Notice the highlighted section, updating tech and other infrastructure. So you can also use it for HVAC and everything else, but you absolutely can use it for the needs that you have in technology. These are the justifications for you with the administration. ESSER 3, same thing. They had a mandatory 20% set aside. Your state has already done that. I checked if you've got that funding. Maintenance of equity, and this is where technology is critical. To be able to do after school, to do the remote learning, to bridge the digital divide, emphasizing addressing disproportionately affected student groups, providing what is needed, hotspots and things to them as well, reopening what you've done and you've done well. But again, technology radiates through all of this. And again, with the American Rescue Plan, implementing facility improvements, support remote learning and concurrent learning. That's all your technology aspects. Technology improvement and upgrades. Again, so I'm beating this horse to death to show that you absolutely could and should receive the funding. This is how the American Rescue Plan, the 3rd one, broke out. There's more funding coming on the horizon. Unfortunately, because of the slow pace that K12 and higher ed have spent their ESSER and HERE monies, Congress removed $100 billion from the Biden infrastructure plan. This, I think, was short-sighted. What they failed to understand is you've been so busy trying to keep business up in the midst of a pandemic and situation nobody has faced in the history of this country, and you did it exceedingly well. They actually penalized you because you didn't spend the money fast enough, but you didn't get to add staff. So you've all been juggling flaming balls, 12 to 13 balls at a time, and your administration, the same thing. And then plus, frankly, there was very poor communication of how this funding could be used. Everybody was afraid to spend it because they're used to E-rate and other federal programs that have too many handcuffs. This has wide latitude, and that's what you need to understand. There isn't an eligible services list. It's whatever you need to get the business of technology or education and the practice of education going. So but there is more money coming. Public sector and anchor institutions have 3rd priority for broadband expansion. We'll talk about that more in a second. Utility and grid infrastructure, there's going to be some specific funding coming down this summer. Some of it is going to require grants. So if that's the case, let us know. Our public sector team, when I started here 4.5 years ago, we had 32 people serving all of public sector. We now have 245. So my team has grown exponentially beyond what I ever thought it would. It looks like we're going to be building to about 500 in 2024. We grew 40% year over year last year and 38% the year before that. Why? Because we're partnering with you and serving you. So we're going to also have grant capabilities, and we'll get you a hold of grant resources because some of this money is going to be competitive, and you absolutely need to go after it, including state and local cybersecurity grant programs, whether it's through the Department of Homeland Security, through the Department of Ed, FEMA, or NTIA. To not try to go after some of these applicable monies would be really short-sighted, and I know you don't have enough people to do it. We don't charge for this. If there's Fortinet product in and you're engaging with CCSI, we can get in and help you do the heavy lift on this. So here's the Cybersecurity Improvement Act, the IIJA program. This is federal speak, and we can break this down for you with individual meetings with CCSI, but you can see the monies that are going to be coming out there. This is going to be competitive. Also, they're going to be expanding the emergency broadband benefit. That is for underserved and unserved. and low income getting broadband to the house. That is different from ECF. ECF has to be for education purposes only. So the family can't use it to watch Netflix or whatever with ECF. With EBB, they can't. There's going to be some interesting call outs on that. So if there's confusion there, get with CCSI and we'll get on a call and we'll straighten it all out. Also, New York now, along with every other state, has at least 100 million in state broadband funding, and this will impact you as well. So make sure that if there's going to be money coming through there, we can work with you and through CCSI to do that. And these are just some of the offices. Of course, New York has their own. And again, what's going to be eligible? This is Fortinet's version of it, but we have almost 60 products in our line for networks and security. Everything you see there, so everything you see that is required for your network, including the Linksys homework, both through ECF or you can use ESSER monies. The services behind that, you can't add more people with your ESSER money. You can add bonuses, but you can't add more people. But you can contract out, whether it be for security, cybersecurity, more network help or whatever. You can use it for contracting, but you can't use it for something like adding headcount because that would require a long-term commitment. So unfortunately, that money's not there. And again, on the private side, we need to see you speak and figure this out individually, whether you qualify through the state for EANS. So this is what we're seeing purchased. Because everybody had those massive number of devices, they all came back to campus. Guess what? Your campus network blew up. So they're frantically adding switches, access points, for sure. Our FortiGuard, everything's Forta in the Fortinet family. I'm the Forta public sector doofus, so Forta doofus, I guess you can call me. But again, this is what we're seeing. Initially, it was a lot of the homework, the extended services out to the home. They're still there because Bridge the Digital Divide is still very much in act, and there's funding for that. But you can see what has FortiNAC, FortiGate, all of these things. And by the way, there is a gift waiver rule that the FCC started in the middle of the pandemic. One of the few things I think they did great, where you could not have to worry about accepting free or loaner devices to keep your network up and running for hotspots, improved capacity, network security, whatever. They extended that to go through this June 30th. And so what a ton of schools have been doing and what we've done, and we've done thousands of these, we bring them in new production level equipment. They plug it in and it either puts up or shuts up. Because frankly, if your partner's not willing to do that for you, to prove that they can do the voodoo they say they do and expect you to spend with them, then they're not a very good partner. Even with the shortage of product, 95% of ours is still in. Why? Because we make our own ASIC chips. We're not nearly in the dire straits some of the other manufacturers are. Some of them have 15 to 18 month delays. So if you're facing that situation and you want to get moving faster with E-Rate or ESSER, you can check out any of what we're talking about. We'll plug it in and it either will exceed your expectations or it won't. There's no risk there. So I would take advantage of that. Again, it runs through June 30th, so it gives you time to see if it's going to be what you want or not. By the way, that applies to public and private schools. If you did E-Rate for 2022, one of the things we say is make it bearable. So if you did the bear invoice and you've got ESSER money, listen closely to this because you're going to learn a lesson of how to do like Ozark or the Mafia and launder money, but 100% legal. So if you use your federal ESSER money, let's say you have a $1 million Category 2 project for E-Rate for 2022, if you use the bear invoice, Form 472, built into the application reimbursement, and you pay for 100% both the whole project plus your match, and then you send that in to USAC, who runs the program. And so let's say you're a 20% district, $1 million, so you had to pay $200,000. Used ESSER for the full $1 million. That goes through USAC, comes back laundered as local dollars. So out of that million, 800K goes back into your local budget. And you're not in danger of having to spend that in time. So not only did you not spend a dime for your E-rate, you actually, by using ESSER, grab 800K for local budget. We've seen hundreds of schools do that. Before the pandemic, less than 8% used the bear invoice. We saw 75% of our schools do that this last year because we taught them this method. Absolutely weighed out, and we, in the first wave of funding, we had 8 million approved in projects. 6 million of the 8 million are using bear. Why? Because you could start it as soon as April 1st, which means they can start now. Because if you don't, you wait for SPY invoicing. This is E-rate speak. You have to wait till July 1st or until you get your funding commitment decision letter, whichever is later. The problem with that, no matter what manufacturer, is the longer you wait and order, the more there may be a problem of you getting your equipment in a timely manner. Again, we're at a great point where 95% of our stock is available. And very few, if anybody else can say that. Why? Because we build our own ASICs chipsets. So that's a big deal. So if you can make 2020 bearable, that's a great way to have a zero impact on your budget, actually a positive impact on your budget. And finally, to get this done, and we've done this, like I said, thousands, heading into 2000 here very quickly by summer, you need to build a business case. So what I would recommend is getting with CCSI. We'll get our director experts who came from the public sector, came from education, who've walked the walk with you and talked the talk with you, been there and done that. We can all get together, we can sit down, and what I really think is most important is not talk solutions, talk need. And don't talk anything else until, and I use a spreadsheet when we're on Zoom, or I take over the dry eraser board, or my team does when we're talking with you. And you just list out everything you need immediately, keep going to wish and want and more, and exhaust that entire list. Then we start talking about solutions, because if you talk solutions early, you start going down rabbit holes and you lose that momentum of creating that list. And the list is important because that's the foundation for the plan, whether to get ESSER money, but also for the money coming down the pipe. So this one-time meeting, or this meeting and this list, is the foundation for you for your plan going forward. So we list it all out. We then go get the solutions. Then CCSI, once we filled out what those solutions are, they're going to get you real budget quotes, and that's key. So they're going to turn that around. And then what's also key is we'll have a second meeting, and I would say no more than 10 days, preferably next week, which means CCSI gets to work hard getting those quotes. But we'll work with them to make sure they do. Is on that next meeting, we go through and see what that budget number is, and each of those budget items are. And then we assign 2 columns. And in 2 sentences, what's the positive impact if the administration approves this? And then the next column, what's the negative impact? 2 simple kindergarten simple questions or statements on what's positive, because again, IT is your bailiwick, but it may not be administration's. But more importantly, in the negative, the more draconian, painful, the better, a paragraph on what may happen if you don't. And nobody wants to be the next P&V, probable next victim, because you've got to have this network rock solid. And so those 2 columns, we then create in a second meeting, now that you have all the numbers, and then in the other column, and there's notes or whatever, but in the other column, we start assigning which funding sources we want to try to get so that Uncle Sam pays for the majority of this. So let's say you had $10 million in total requests. You got 800K in ESSER to take the first 3 off the list. That's great. But you still want to keep this whole work product, because then you're going to see, okay, what's left? Is it E-rate eligible? Are we going to apply for E-rate with it? Okay, we're going to do that. And then we're going to look at what's coming down the pipe funding-wise through the infrastructure and future funding, because there's 17 more bills out there, and 7 of those include trying to get more funding for education and cybersecurity. we're going to identify those and we're going to assign values to those. So you're going to go from an inverted pyramid, your most important down to your least, and the funding that goes along with it. And really, it sounds like it's complex, but it is not. And it sets you up to then have a plan to not only, when you have to go after grants, you've got the core of what is needed, and we'll help you create a template to apply much faster, but you're also going to track how you're going to spend it. Now, if you do have to use local funding or state funding, we want to make sure and include that. So that's what we really like to see happen. And so get together with CCSI. Let's get those meetings scheduled. This works. It has worked well. We can give you tons of references across the country where it's been a much better impact for IT and ed tech. Because again, if you don't have the plans, you're not going to get. So, but if you can show the justification in a manner, and again, with the ESSER money, they have to spend it. So might as well spend it on education because you need it. And with that, I'll stop pontificating. And are there any questions?
Yes, we got some questions in. Hold on. Let me see. So one question we got was, someone is a part of a private school and wanted to know if there is any individual information you can let them know about regarding funding for private schools.
That's where we'd be headed. So this is New York, and this is the ESSER Stabilization Fund. So for private schools, they have the emergency assistance to non-public schools. What you need to do is, one, depending especially on the low income area, if you're serving low income, that's the priority. So there's $500,000 set aside. Get with the State Department of Education or get with the governor's office or an advocate. Anyway, find out who is included on the EANS funding that is strictly private. The other area is making sure you do use E-rate because you are eligible for that. That's another. And then the other thing to look for are grants. So that's something that, again, I've just added 20-something people to my direct team. We're adding 5 more. In fact, I got interviews later today. And so we're working with the grants office and a couple of other places for that. So as long as they're leading with Fortinet product line, we're working in, and if we can do the grant for you and you need that help, we'll make the connection. Absolutely. CCSI can do that. And they're the first contact because they have great local resources, but they will also use ours. But if you're a private school, check this first. And you would I would start out New York Department of Education and then search EANS or Emergency Assistance in Non-Public Schools. And CCSI are going to send you this and a couple other links as well, along with the PowerPoint. I hope that helps.
Yes, and also, yeah, we'll follow up, and if you have any further questions, we can set up one-on-one meetings with CCSI and Fortinet. Another question was, is there an eligibility products service list?
So that's most commonly asked, and that's because you're used to it with E-rate. The answer is no. You have wide latitude with ESSER and EANS, by the way, if you get it, to spend it on what is needed for the school. Again, there's 15 different areas, basically everything that's needed to run the school. Technology is key to that. And so whatever is required is whatever is eligible. And you use local procurement rules. You don't have to apply to the feds. You don't have to apply to the state. If it's ESSER money, your school district has already done that, and that money is sitting in their coffers. They'll work with the state on regulation and requirements, but you should receive very little pushback. And if you do, let us know. We'll get you with the right people, because if they're not allowing you to use it for technology and say it's not eligible, they're actually denying what's in the federal law, the federal act, of all 3 grounds.
Great. So we're actually ending the time slot for the webinar, but we will be reaching out to each one of you guys. We really appreciate you coming. Rob Villano, I'm just gonna quickly pass the ball to you to just go over a few reminders. Rob, are you there?
I'm here, Kat. Thank you, Kat. I appreciate that. So just a couple of reminders. We have a webinar in 2 weeks titled Cybersecurity Solutions and Services for our K-12 education clients. And so we hope you can sign up for that. It's May 11th at 11 a.m. We'll be talking there about how to safeguard your infrastructure and sensitive information. We're sure to have a vibrant discussion on all of the services and products we offer, and as it relates to ESSER and other funding sources, as we talked about and Jeff mentioned today. We hope you can sign up for this event. Next steps are your account managers will be following up with you to talk further about today's webinar and your technology and cyber needs. We want to thank everybody for joining today. Appreciate your time, and we look forward to serving you in the future. Thanks so much, everyone.